making a cleaner, less brushed area so that, again, if you need to get firefighting resources back in that area, you know, they're gonna need some room, and they're not gonna, if they're not in danger of putting their people in a really brushy, narrow area, and a canyon at that, if it's cleared, they're more likely to put people here than if it isn't for fire suppression activities. The getting rid of a lot of plants that have come in since the cessation of fire and management. You could thin, if you could find someone, you might be able to thin a lot of these young Douglas fir and redwoods out and be able to maybe be marketable. I don't know what the haul costs are, but there are too many stems per acre in our forests, and what's happening is that is the fuel for the wildfires. If they got something to burn, that fire is going to keep going. And so we have to start managing our area for these climatic events that we're having. If we are truly in a new era of climate and climate change, which are called the Anthropocene, then we have to think ahead, 50, 100, couple hundred years ahead, about what we want our lands to look like and how best that we can help our lands and our lands can help us weather and adapt to these episodes of climate change. A working forest, this is what happens when you don't work in your forest and you don't have a working forest. As I've said before, we live in one of the most species diverse areas of the continental United States. If there's an opening, something's going to take that opening. So we may as well take the opportunity to decide and manipulate the vegetation to provide the trees that we want and the environmental communities that we so desire. In areas you don't see a lot of the orangey pink tree, that's the dogwood tree. And dogwood is a tree that will grow underneath a full canopy. So I would cut the tan oaks out of that spot. I would cut that madrone because it's not going to reach maturity. Also, by cutting them out, you're releasing whatever water is coming in the stream. I think it's probably coming up from those creeks up there, maybe underneath the ground here. So you're going to be, the more you cut the trees out, the more you release the water. For a short term, unless you can, you know, keep cutting the tree and then it just doesn't grow anymore. But that's one thing, that's why I use fire. Once these trees get established, it's hard to get them out of the picture. Yeah. Fire used in rotation 3-4 years, you know, fire just depending on the species and what you want to accomplish, that's going to kill these sprouts. Because you're always going to be here with a chainsaw, clippers, and a rake trying to thin this area. But the mechanism to thin it cost effectively and environmentally friendly are prescribed burns. Yeah. But you're going to have to invest the time and energy to get the areas ready for that. And there is a lot of work. It likes to come in and colonize open areas. And that's, again, fire. You're going to have to use fire through here in a rotation to get this knocked back. It'll be a nightmare brushing that. That's why fire is so important to the ecosystem. We're never going to get a handle on this. You know, really. We need the complementary fire. Well, we'll get a, you know, we can go in there and we can whack around, do our best. But as far as cost effectively and doing a lot of land in a short amount of time, fire. And you can burn at night. You can burn early, you know, in the season, late in the season. Fire is our tool. We've learned to use it to manipulate the vegetation. And we need to use it again. It's been excluded too long from the ecosystem. When I say release, I just mean cut around the plant. try to get rid of those suckers because they're going to take over that energy. Maybe at this point have someone with clippers on your crew.
Can you repeat for us why you were saying you want to cut it down low and get in there with the clippers after?
Because what happens is if we miss, this is a great big root ball that's underneath the ground. And if we miss the suckers, the smaller limbs coming off, they're going to take the energy. They're going to suck what that root ball's giving them. So what we want to do is cut it back down to the base and let it sprout out itself. And as far down to the base as you're comfortable with a chainsaw, or have someone on your crew have a big pair of loppers so they could come down and get some of these numerous suckers. See, that's all one plant, and it wants to grow, so it's going to keep sending out suckers and little until you let a couple of the main shoots take over. And so
that would be right to there.
Yeah, what will happen is you will find weavers that will come and look in areas like this for new shoots, especially if you were able to do a prescribed burn where you could burn that area and understoner burn here, your plant, see, it was growing there because it gets sunlight. It's a pioneer species that, see, note this, it's one of the first ones that comes in after a fire and in the open areas. And that's what it's trying to do. It wants to grow. And the only place it's getting full sunshine is this little meadow area. So I want it to send up its new shoots, and then those will be basket materials. And if you have basket weavers coming through and always gathering, you're always getting it trimmed. We take care of our basket gathering areas. And one point is that we pull out the brush, we cut them back. We've not taken care of basket materials in here in quite a lot, and I can't say that because this is Pomo country and I'm not aware of, so I speak with the short frame of reference, right? And this area, from what I've seen so far, it was a good gathering area, good habitation area. And so we have to do extra work to start getting these areas in condition and start allowing the plants that we want to focus on, which are not conifer a lot of the times. It's these brush species, these forbs that are associated to open oak woodlands and grasslands. It is hard to walk around in an area that has been, has what they call high stumps. So if you can maybe have someone on your crew, who has a saw that can do the stump flushing, it just works out better as far as people. And the more you cut back some of these stumps too, the less probability you have of them coming back up. You eventually will kill the tree if you keep cutting and cutting on it. Maybe someday they'll be able to run fire through this area, and fire will be the tool instead of the chainsaw.
Smaller ones.
I'd take all the smaller ones out. I would let that big stem right in front of me, and I would let that other stem right there take over. I would go in, I would fall if I was writing a prescription for this, I would have marked these smaller redwood trees that are basically what I'm kind of seeing from now, they're basal sprouts. So you already have your main stump, your main stem that's taken over. Get rid of the basal sprouts, and I would take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'd probably take 8 or 9 trees out of there, those younger ones, and just leave these guys. You want your dominant trees to take over. Okay.
So looking at these two tan oaks there, there's 2 stems that are bigger, and then the smaller one there has limbs that go all the way right down to the ground. So would you leave that? Would you
I'd cut that out too.
Okay.
Because you want more space between your trees, and those are just going to die. They're never going to amount to anything because they're going to be suppressed by these, right? The dominant redwoods and the dominant tan oak. So it's just more space you get in between them, the better. A lot of these younger plants, trees that are growing, they're not going to get enough sunlight, they're not going to get enough nutrients, and they're not going to be able to really grow. They'll grow to a certain point. See that dead limb right there on the... That's what's going to keep happening. It's going to send out shoots, and then they're going to die because it's just not getting what it needs to survive. It's to thrive. It's just surviving. So we're going to cut that out, and we're going to cut around the suckers, and we'll probably maybe leave this one main stem to take all the energy out of that root ball that's underneath there. So you got to have one to take the energy, otherwise you'll keep fighting all these sprouts because it will want to keep sprouting because it wants to grow. Actually, I'm looking at the lid. You can tell the difference between the black oak and white oak. It's got pointy leaves on it. The yellow and green is a black oak. And that's a hardwood species. I don't know if it'll be able to grow. So I think that that might be something, and we're clearing everything out. We might just leave that one because it may take over and grow and thrive, or it may die. But because it's one of the few black oak in this whole line, and you have the rest of the black oak, actually have a black oak groves over there, and this road has dissected them. So a long time ago, this would have been more black oak coming off of that slope down toward the creek, and then up towards the slope, and then would hit the hardwoods and the conifers, and then that would probably be what the component was. There were scattered large diameter redwoods and oaks in here. Now this black oak is a remnant from this oak woodland grasslands that we see in front of us. And this black oak in the past probably continued further up the hill. Right now what we have are a few remnants that are on this slope of the black oak, and we're going to cut the tan oak, and we're going to cut the Douglas fir out of here, and the madrone, because the more fir trees and conifers that come up and encroach the black oak, the more that this tree won't be able to get as much sunshine, as much water, as much nutrients, because the other trees are going to be competing against it. So we're going to cut out all these other trees, and we're going to release these black oaks so that it can get full sunshine, water. We'll leave enough for the shade, but black oak is a sun-loving tree. And there are so many tan oaks per acre sprouts that it is not going to impact the tan oak population if we cut these out. One of the things that we have is black oaks usually are in an oak woodland grassland, but right now they're getting crowded out by the conifer. This plant over here that I'm going to show you is a hazel bush. Now hazel bush, a lot of the tribes will use the hazel for basket sticks. Hazel, black oak grow together in the oak woodland grassland. And if you look across the canyon here, across the creek, you'll see that used to be a meadow, and it was a black oak woodland. We have a lot of conifer and a lot of brush species growing into the meadows. They're taking over the meadows, and we will lose these meadows. It's all part of the successional stage of a forest. If you do nothing in the forest, it will go through the process of forbs, brush, trees, and then to the climax stage, which is a conifer forest. And there's very little under an old growth conifer forest. So this is one of the species of concern is the black oak, is the hazel, and it's the oak woodland grassland that we really have to work to keep open and to keep clear of the other plant species that'll grow. We need to check the successional stage of a forest. Chainsaws or fire, or in this case both. We've got a lot of work to do. We haven't had the forest managed for other species rather than timber for 150 years. So our forests have always been managed before contact to provide the resources that tribal people need. Since no management has been done, since no fire has been into the ecosystem, this forest is being allowed to evolve into an old growth Douglas fir and redwood forest. And it's crowding out the oak woodlands that the animals, the people, and the forest needs. Hazel likes a little more sun. They can give you nuts and basket sticks, but that one right there, and there's too many Doug fir and redwoods in here. You gotta make up your mind kind of what you want to go with. It's a schizophrenic stand right now. You got a lot of different types of plants, but nothing, you've got your main stems, but all this coming up under it, it's not going to really do very well. And so you can either let it stay, and if a fire happens to come along, it'll burn, or try to take it out manually. The animals really depend on hazel for the nuts when it does have hazelnuts. Fire can take out and clean up an area a lot faster than a group of people can. But you gotta invest the time, the energy, and the money to prepare the area to receive fire. Keep species diversity. Like you have seen, we are in areas that are dominated by conifer. That's the Douglas fir. There's a lot of redwood here too. But the hardwoods need more help. The hardwoods are the ones that need to be released. The dogwood trees, the maple trees, the yew wood, the plants such as manzanita and other brush species. The madrone, that's another good species to keep. If you have good madrones that have a good base, of a solid stem. A lot of times if you've seen along this road system, you'll have madrones, but they're never going to develop into trees because they just don't have the optimum growing environment where they're located right now. Tan oaks seem to be doing really good. The tan oak regeneration in this area around Willits is good, is actually too good sometimes. So you get a lot of young tan oak trees, groups of them, and I would just go in and thin some of the weaker tan oak trees and decide which tan oak sprout is going to be your one or two main stems that you're going to cultivate to become your future trees. And when you go in and there's a group of trees and they're coming off of the base of an old tree, that hardwood that's been cut or has been burned, you'll see at the base of the stump a bunch of sucker sprouts will start coming out because there's still a great big ball of roots underneath of the ground that hasn't been affected. And that ball of roots is going to want to start growing again. It's going to do what it does naturally, grow. So that's why you get a lot of suckers coming out. Just like the redwoods, you cut down one, you'll get 10 or 20 of them back. It's the same thing with hardwoods. So you want to choose your main trees that you want to take all the energy off of that buried stump underneath the ground and cut out the rest. Just keep cutting out the rest, and pretty soon those main ones that you chose, they will take over the energy of that root ball, and they will be the trees that grow from the death of the mother tree, our father tree. When I say release that plant from the competition that's around it.
Why keep the maple?
Because maple helps to keep the water table. It also helps to keep some diversity into your area. And people use maple, the tribal people, I'm not sure about pomo, but I know up north we use the bark of the maple for maple bark work skirts. In our ceremonies, we use those in our ceremonies. I know it's a mass of conifers, but within there is a short needle tree with big red berries, and that's a yew tree. And yew trees are really important in the ecosystem, but they're also used by the native people. We use the wood for the bows, the staves for bows. We use the wood for making spoons, and the bark from the yew has Taxol, which is a cancer cure, or not a cure. It is used for the treatment of cancer. And yew wood is used for the treatment of cancer. Now, about 20 years ago, when they found out the yew tree had a chemical in it that could help in the treatment of cancer, the government forbid the cutting of yew trees for a little while, for maybe about 10 years. Then they made the synthetic chemical that the yew produces. They were able to make it synthetically. So then the yew was basically a tree that we could harvest again, that could be cut. Yew is very used in Northern California a lot. We'll talk to some of the pomo and find out if they use it. I'm Karuk, so my knowledge is up in Northern California. And as soon as we start working with some pomo weavers and gatherers down here, we'll start getting some more information on their uses of the tree. So right now, what we're doing is we're going to release the tree. We're going to release all the vegetation that's competing and keeping those trees. It's a stand. There's at least 3 or 4 trees right here by the road. But if you go back further up the hill, you may find more yew. Now, I haven't seen very much yew through this road system. So for me, I'm thinking that one needs to be treated as its own little microhabitat of species of yew. And that means getting those big Doug firs out of the way, that tan oak, all that should come out from in front of the yew, so that if there's a fire here, that the yew will have a better chance of surviving a fire that may come into this ecosystem. And it's unique in here. I don't know, a lot of my experience has been up in the Klamath River. So I'm down here in Willits now, and I don't really know how much yew is naturally occurring here. But the fact that this little spot is unique on this road system is definitely a reason to keep that species here and release it from the competition of the Douglas fir and the tan oaks, because they will outcompete the yew. Yew is a small tree and it grows slow. I would saw that down. I would saw that tan oak down. I would saw the Doug fir. I would just clear in front of it until you hit that. You see that orangey, yellow looking one, pinkish one? That's a dogwood. I would clear these trees out till I get to that one right there. That's a hard one. I think that it is like maple. Looks like it might be maple. And then that one's a dogwood. So we're coming close to where water is occurring underneath the ground. That's why these plants, also right here, you have some of the horsetail. Definite sign. You know, before this road was punched in here, I'm sure there were a lot of little creeks that had a course that came through here. It's just clear in front of it. We don't want to disturb the area too much because they're growing so well in here. But we want to get rid of the trees that aren't going to amount to much. They're impeding the growth, And if anything catastrophic happens, these will be contributed to, this brush species and these trees will contribute to the heat that's going to hit those yews. This is a plant that it's a member of the Ceanothus species, and we call it deer brush, tick brush, wild lilac brush, soap brush. And this is actually a basket material. This tree is old, this bush, it's old, and it's out of production for being able to be used as basket material. And when this is cut back to the base, the new shoots will start coming up. And those shoots will be nice and strong and straight. They'll grow, the side shoots won't be short and stubby, they'll be long. These are willow, but these can, Ceanothus can produce sticks equivalent to willow sticks, and they're used in basket weaving. A lot of the plants that I'm familiar working with are from the Northern California. I'm a member of the Karuk tribe. So the next thing we'll show is the guys cutting these plants back down to the base. And then we'll take a little picture of that to show you what it looks like, because it's a nitrogen producer and it only lives 50 years. You can cut it, it'll grow back, cut it and grow back. The deer love grazing on it. Bees love the flowers. The birds love to make nests in it. So it provides a lot of habitat. Over here we have, this is another brush species. It's called rabbit brush. And I'm not sure if the Pomos have a use for it. We don't use it too often, but at all that I know of. The rabbit brush?
The Scotch broom, yeah, they said that, I heard that was
This one's the rabbit brush.
oh, is it?
Yeah, Scotch broom looks a little bit different, but you heard, rabbit brush is just,
these are a little stronger.
it's something, it is a brush species that comes in. I think that it is browsed on possibly. And I'm not sure, but again, this grows fast, and it's one of the pioneer species that come in after a fire area. I would if our folks do a little more research on the rabbit brush. And that's another thing, when you come on species and you're not sure, just go, go to Google, go to the plant, cow plant, and learn about the plant, how it's fitting into your ecosystem. Is it native? Is it non-native? What are the tribal uses of it? And then, so there'll be some plants you'll want to do further research on. And be careful of the irises. The iris are a really good, important ground cover, and they provide the flowers for the variety of bees that like to live within and adjacent of these meadow areas. So we always try to keep from having heavy equipment, because you'll find areas where there's more than just a few here and there. It's like a big thick carpet. We try to keep heavy equipment out of there and people from dragging stuff through, so that we can always have that iris component there.